Hello fellow bike people, I want to talk about books for cyclists. Now a lot of people are going to use the internet, they're going to use YouTube, they're going to use online documents to figure out everything they need to about bikes. But there's just something about a book that makes it special. It's a wonderful thing to hold in your hands, wonderful sensation to just flip through it, the smell of books is good even. But one of the best things about books is because winter's coming and obviously riding outside is going to get a lot more difficult or possibly not even doable, some good bike-related books can really help you indulge that bike urge even when you can't go for a ride. Now these being a great way to learn about bikes, I've kind of divided the 12 books I have here into 3 different categories. Our first category is the bare basics. This is the first thing you should do if you're building up a bike library. The first 2, these are basically just how to ride a bike, how to own a bike, how to maintain a bike manuals. But the way these 2 are written, these are really easy reads, they have a little bit of humor in them, and they just make a lot of sense. They simplify things that are often really overcomplicated in the bike world. So this first one, Just Ride by Peterson. This book is all about cutting through the myths and the conventional wisdom that you'll hear in cycling that really, like I said, just overcomplicates it. When it says it's a radically practical guide to riding your bike, it is extremely practical, this book, so really recommend this one. And this one, The Ultimate Bicycle Owner's Manual. This one is by Edmond Weiss, who is actually a really well-known blogger and author in the bike world. I'm actually going to feature one of his other books later, but this is his For the Masses book. The whole point of this one is it takes all of the points he tries to make in his Bike Snob series, but removes the snobby aspect. Even the illustrations and instructions in this book, they're really good, really clear, really simple, easy to follow. I like this one. It teaches things like how to set your bike up for riding in bad conditions, how to navigate through city traffic, how to choose your bike in the first place. So, really recommend books like this. Next, Urban Cycling by Bellando. This is beautiful. This is just a lookbook. This is inspiration. So if I were to just open to a random page here, it's just pictures of beautiful bikes with their owners, and maybe some little quotes about what the bike's used for, if the bike has a nickname, things like that. So this is just a feel-good kind of book. This doesn't really inform you about anything, but it's just so nice to have. And last of the bare basics is one of these coffee table books. This one is written by Chris Boardman, who's an Olympic cyclist, and it covers basically all aspects of the sport side of cycling. So it starts with some of the early history of bikes, it talks about different styles of riding and racing, like this page actually talks about racing on tandem bikes, and some cool history tidbits, like this bit about cross-country bikes and how it was originally a training sport for road riders and may have actually been the original form of mountain biking depending on what you consider mountain biking. So a book like this I really recommend. It's a big bike-related coffee table book. If you've already got things like that in your collection and you want to expand it a little, maybe take it up to an intermediate level by this scaling, I've got some more to recommend. So as far as stereotypes about sports go, cyclists being kind of snobby and elitist at, the sporting level, it's kind of a reputation we have. Now, some of us just ride bikes because we enjoy riding bikes, but competitive riders, I'm talking the ones who eventually want to ride in the Tour de France, they're the ones who have kind of the snobby image about them. Now, of course, that is just a stereotype, that is not actually true about most road riders, but books like these embrace that stereotype and kind of in a tongue-in-cheek way laugh at it. So, Edmond Weiss, the author I mentioned earlier, this is his other book, well, his original book actually. This is very much the same thing. It's a how to ride, how to navigate traffic, how to set up for winter conditions. It's an urban cycling book, basically. It's got some very dry humor. It basically says, okay, if you think I'm a snob, I'll show you how snobby I can really be. Let me find an example here. Okay, here we go. On different types of cyclists. The roadie, the traditional road cyclist. The racers, with the brightly colored tight outfits for aerodynamics, skinny tires, and the curvy handlebars on their bikes. Why other cyclists don't like them. They don't appear to enjoy what they're doing, and they don't appear to know you exist. Compatibility with other cyclists have been known to appear at mountain bike races and cyclocross races, but are largely compatible only with their own kind. They're definitely embracing the humorous side of it. And in the same vein, but a bit less deliberately comic, The Rules by the Velominati. This is basically a set of rules for those hardcore racers. And it's things like no frame-mounted pumps, and your tires, saddle, and bar tape should be matched in color. Rules like that. On the not funny side, there are some legal implications to cycling. Obviously nowhere near as much as, say, driving a car, but if you're riding on the road and, you're riding in traffic or around pedestrians, you can cause accidents. You do have to be careful. So, a guide to the law surrounding that is actually really useful. This one is Every Cyclist's Guide to Canadian Law by Craig Forseasi and Nicole Laviolette. I'm sure there are more up-to-date copies than mine out there by now, but really useful things in terms of, how to navigate traffic lights or really tricky intersections, things like that. And last of this little intermediate section, have you heard of Igor Kank? So, back in Toronto, I think this was, when was this? Like, the early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken? Bike theft was worse than it is now, which is hard to believe. Bike theft in Toronto is really bad right now. But, back then, most of it could actually be attributed to one guy. That was Igor Kank, also known as Uncle Igor in the local bike community at the time. He ran a little tiny bike shop downtown, and he basically picked up street youth, took them in, supported them, and had them go out and steal bikes, and that's what he sold to make money to support his little group there. Almost like this weird, soft Canadian version of Charles Manson. But this graphic novel, this is mind-blowing. So if you look at it, that's not hand-drawn, that's rendered photos or stills from a documentary, because they were filming a documentary on him before his whole crazy bust when he got caught with all of the bikes he stole in his warehouse with, I think it was like 1,500 bikes in one of the warehouses or something like that. And they ended up turning what was that documentary into this book. So this is the whole story of Igor Kank and his perspective and how he justified what he did. So very interesting read. And also a big part of Toronto bike culture, so it's good to know. And last, for the ones who want the top tier, most advanced bike books. Honestly, these are more of a point of pride to own than something you're actually going to read all the time, but they're still awesome. Case in point, Around the World on a Bicycle by Thomas Stevens. This is a read. This is not light reading. This is an absolute tome. So this is the story of a man who rode his bicycle around the world in 1884, and it's just his memoirs, basically. That's a good story if you can read that amount, which I'm a reader, but even this is a challenge for me to read. This is a bicycle repair manual from 1977. It is completely out of date. Basically, none of the information on here has any bearing on modern bikes, so unless you have a bike from the 70s and that's all you ride and all you work on, this is an art piece. This is something you own because it's just beautiful. Even just the photos of what's going on in here. This looks like the inside of an internal gear hub, and it's things you barely see anymore. These derailleur assemblies, they look nothing like that these days. This is so old school, but so beautiful. I think I almost started sounding like Bob Ross there. This is a bit more practical and useful for me making YouTube videos on bikes, and especially being that I talk about bike history in a lot of my videos. Bicycle Design and Illustrated History by Tony Landand and Hans Erhard Lessing. This is more of a textbook than an actual book you would read. This is very technical information about the design of bicycles. My main example for where I used this book in making a video was when I talked about the 1991 Gary Fisher RS1 and its position as the first modern mountain bike, or full suspension mountain bike as we know full suspension mountain bikes. This book brings that up, but it also brings up things like what it considers to be the original full suspension bike, which was the Alex Moulton full suspension folding bike, which if I'm not mistaken was from the 1960s? So like I said, this is very detailed information. This is by far the most informative for somebody making YouTube content on bikes, but for your average cyclist, that is just an art piece, something that's cool to own. And you know I saved the best for last. Now I work at Cyclepath, I'm a bike mechanic. Working on bikes is just as satisfying as riding bikes to me. This one, by Guy Andrews and Rohan Derbosh, oh my god. this one is amazing. It talks about all the details of what you'd see in a bike shop with stunning photography. I should mention the photographer's name, Taz Darling, because the photography in this book is wonderful. Look at that. That is stunning. This book is the prettiest book, and the level of detail that they go into is just crazy. And for the most part, this book is just step by step assembling 2 different bikes. So you can actually kind of follow it from start to finish as a bike gets assembled, but I don't. I just enjoy the beautiful pictures and get inspired as to how to set up my own bike shop. Judge me all you want. It would basically look like this. So those are some of the books I would recommend for anyone looking to start a bike library, something to read over the winter, or let's say you're working with a group like Mississauga Cycles. I'm thinking of donating these books, starting a little bike library there, because there are a lot of people who like learning by reading a book, and these are a great way to do that. I will try to post links to any of these books that I can find down in the description, but I mean, some of them have been out of print for a long time, so I don't know how many I'll be able to find to put the links for. Anything that I can't find to put the link down there, I bet you can go to your average used bookstore and buy a copy of a book like anything I showed you for $5, $10, $15. Just like bikes, used books, they're always such good deals, and you can always find such treasures in stores that specialize in the used ones.